Andy Hildebrand has just quit his job, and it has nothing to do with his performance. After all, he did just save Exxon $500 million. Only a couple years ago, in 1976, he graduated with a PhD in electrical engineering. He got a job at Exxon, finding oil underground. The general idea was to send sound waves into the earth and wait for them to come back. It was Hildebrand's job to decipher them and figure out what was down there. He was only at Exxon for 3 years when they ran into a big problem. They were nearing the end of a 7-year contract on an oil pipeline, and if they didn't find any oil to put in it, they'd lose their $500 million tax write-off. They brought in Hildebrand to find oil, and find oil he did. While this was a resounding success for Exxon, Hildebrand figured that if he could save them $500 million, he might be able to do something pretty successful himself. So in 1979, he quit his job at Exxon. Hildebrand rounded up 3 partners and some venture capital, and together they started Landmark Graphics. It was pretty much a continuation of what he had done at Exxon, making software that could generate 3D seismic maps and find oil underground. Hildebrand's entrepreneurial intuition was right, and Landmark Graphics took off. He stayed at the company for 10 years, seeing it through a public offering and a listing on NASDAQ. Hildebrand retired 10 years later in 1989, wealthy enough to never have to work again. After 2 decades in the oil industry, he was finally ready to sit back and relax. The National Association of Music Merchants Conference is a once-a-year event where insiders come and show off the latest in music technology. Andy Hildebrand is at the 1995 gathering, having lunch with some friends and seeing if they have any ideas for new music inventions. After Hildebrand retired from oil in 1989, he decided to get back into music. In high school, Hildebrand had been something of a flute virtuoso. His PhD had even been funded by flute lessons and a music scholarship. So after retiring, he went back to school to study music composition. He began composing with the latest sampling synthesizers, but was disappointed with the quality of the flute sounds. After all, he would know what they should sound like. He figured he could make a better sampling program, one that actually sounded like the instruments. And it didn't take long for him to release Infinity. Hildebrand's new software did a great job of creating samples. It even put the Los Angeles Philharmonic out of business for a while, but it was self-defeating. All you need is one sample and you can just use it over and over again. Hildebrand's program sold about 5 copies before it put itself out of business. While Hildebrand was now inside the music industry, he didn't have a product. He met some friends for lunch at the Music Merchants Conference to see if they had any ideas. Someone at the table joked that he should make a box that would let them sing in tune. Nobody seemed amused by the suggestion, and Hildebrand filed it away. After 6 months of trying and failing other ideas, he came back to this magic box. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, just one everyone thought was impossible. The number of calculations it would take to analyze a person's voice and move it to a pitch required a supercomputer. Hildebrand looked back on his days in the oil industry and thought that there might be a better way to do these calculations. The signals used to find oil underground were a lot like a human voice. Hildebrand used this similarity and a lot of math to turn millions of calculations into just 4. These new formulas made it possible for a computer to analyze a voice and put it on a pitch in a reasonable amount of time. A year later, Hildebrand returned to the Music Merchants Conference with a magic box that would let you sing in tune. He called his new invention Autotune, and it practically sold itself to every studio in Los Angeles. The program could fix wrong notes in a vocal performance. A song that would have taken 100 tries to get right could now be done in just 1. Although Autotune invaded studios in the late 90s, the average listener would never know. Engineers did their best to keep it a secret, but something as incredible as Autotune wouldn't be able to stay hidden forever. Cher was going to have to do something different if she wanted to make a musical comeback. Her last album, It's a Man's World, released in 1995, and audiences weren't feeling the collection of rock ballads. The UK president of Warner Music suggested that Cher make a dance album, but she wasn't interested in the genre. They didn't make real songs. The president went looking for songs that would convince Cher to make a dance album and turn her back into a pop star. Walking down the hall, he ran into a songwriter and asked him to submit a few songs for the new Cher album. A few days later, the president got a tape, and he really liked one of the songs, Believe. It had a good chorus, but the verses needed work, and even after passing the song around, no one could seem to get them right. 7 songwriters later, Believe now had 2 passable verses, but they were still missing something. In exacerbation, the producers turned to a pitch-correcting software on their computer. Autotune. The program would usually change pitches somewhat slowly, matching how a singer would slide between notes. Looking for something different, the producer set it to change notes instantly, turning Cher's voice into something more robot than human. Cher fell in love with the effect. It was exactly what she was looking for. Believe went on to be a smash hit, spending 7 weeks on top of the UK charts. Although everyone loved the song, nobody knew what that one effect during the verse was. The idea of using Autotune on a vocal performance was such a taboo that the producer said the effect was done with a vocoder. The public now had a taste of Autotune, even if they didn't know it, and it would only be a matter of time before it was everywhere. T-Pain has just signed with Convict Music and has spent 2005 trying to make his debut album. Akon saw his potential as a rapper, but now T-Pain wanted to branch out. He wanted to become a singer. In order to stand out from all the other singers, T-Pain needed a voice that was different. He heard an effect that could do just that while listening to a Jennifer Lopez song. It only lasted for a second, and he had no way to figure out what it was. T-Pain spent a day trying every single vocal effect he could find, until he heard Autotune. It was exactly what he was looking for. When T-Pain dropped the lead single, I'm Sprung, audiences were amazed at what they heard. His voice was perfectly in tune, and it switched between notes instantly. He didn't quite sound like any other singer. While I'm Sprung was popular, peaking at number 8 on Billboard, T-Pain still didn't completely embrace the effect. The next single, I'm in Love with a Stripper, was done almost entirely without Autotune. When T-Pain finally dropped his debut album, Rapper Turned Singer, its success convinced him to go all in on his signature vocal effect. T-Pain exploded in popularity and became the go-to feature artist. He brought Autotune to songs with Chris Brown, Flo Rida, and Kanye. By the time T-Pain dropped his second album, Epiphany, he had become the face of Autotune. While T-Pain was using the vocal effect to great success, not everyone liked the idea of a program that could turn anyone into a singer. Jay-Z was not happy with the state of rap in 2009. The success of T-Pain and Kanye West had convinced an entire wave of rappers to start using Autotune. The sound was becoming saturated and audiences were growing tired of the vocal effect. It had become so much of a laughingstock that even Wendy's had made a commercial making fun of the program. At the time, Jay-Z was making The Blueprint 3. He was working closely with Kanye, and the two had even recorded an Autotune song together. But Kanye got a different idea after hearing a No ID instrumental. The beat from the classic hip-hop producer brought Kanye back to the origins of hip-hop, and he thought Jay-Z should make an anti-Autotune song. Jay-Z liked the suggestion and even took all of the Autotune off of his album. Jay-Z recorded over the No ID instrumental, and the song became DOA, Death of Autotune. It was released as the lead single for The Blueprint 3 and marked a significant point in the campaign against Autotune. Other musicians had already shown their distaste for the effect. Death Cab for Cutie performed at the 2009 Grammys, wearing blue ribbons to protest the program. By the early 2010s, the public was staunchly against Autotune. Kanye was back to making rap music with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and T-Pain was taking a break from music, believing his sound to be saturated. It seemed like the death of Autotune was right around the corner. Future had a lot to prove at the end of 2014. The rapper's engagement to singer Cher had just ended, and he put all of that emotion onto his mixtape, Monster. Future leveraged the success of this mixtape onto his next album, Dirty Sprite 2, which debuted at number 1 on Billboard. Listening to these projects, one aspect of Future's rapping stands out: his use of Autotune. While public perception pushed the effect out of the spotlight, it had never disappeared. Autotune's ability to fix notes and turn 100 takes into just one was way too good to pass up. The effect remained in studios and was used in one way or another on pretty much every single major release. As long as Autotune remained in studios, musicians would continue to experiment with it. Despite Jay-Z's warning, rappers kept finding new ways to use the program, and the sound of Autotune eventually made a comeback with Future, Migos, Travis Scott, and many others. While the sound of Autotune will continue to go in and out of style, the program's ability to fix a vocal performance will keep it around until the day people stop making mistakes. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you think of Autotune and your favorite song recorded with the effect. You can find Sound Selection on YouTube, as a podcast on iTunes, and on Instagram.